Hi, 6th grade, it's Mrs. Fondren. Today we're going to be talking about adding integers. What are integers? Integers are whole numbers and their opposites. For example, 3 and -3, 5 and -5, 126 and -126. We can't forget 0. 0 is an integer as well, but it's neither positive or negative. When adding integers, we need to think of them as the amount of positives or negatives. For example, the number 3 means 3 positives. The number -3 means there are 3 negatives. 17 would be 17 positives. -17 would be 17 negatives. You've been adding positive integers since 1st grade. Think about it. 5 plus 3, that's 5 positives and 3 positives, which is 8. 6 plus 4 would be 6 positives and 4 positives, which would be positive 10 or 10. You've been doing this for a long time. Now let's look at adding negative integers. This is going to seem strange, but think of it this way. If we have 3 cats and 2 cats, we have 5 cats. If we have 6 bikes and 5 bikes, we have 11 bikes. When we learned fractions, we learned that 2/4 plus 1/4 would be 3/4. Negatives are the same way. 4 negatives plus 6 negatives would be 10 negatives. With numbers, it would look like this. A -4 would be 4 negatives, plus a -6, which would be 6 negatives, would equal 10 negatives. You can also think about it on a number line. If we start at -4 and we add 6 negatives, we end up on our number line at -10. So if we have 4 negatives plus 7 negatives, we end up with 11 negatives, which is -11. If we have 7 negatives and we add 12 more negatives, we have 19 negatives, which is -19. Pretty simple, right? Well, what if we add positives and negatives? We're going to use counters to help us represent this today. So a green counter represents a positive and a red counter represents a negative. So when you have 1 positive and 1 negative, that equals a 0 set. Think about it on our number line. If we're at +1 and we add a negative, it brings us to 0. So whenever you see a green counter and a red counter together, that's actually equal to 0. Let's try it. If we have 3 positives and 3 negatives, well, that equals 0, that equals 0, and that equals 0. So 3 plus -3 is 0. Same thing, if we have 5 negatives and we add 5 positives, that's 0, that's 0, that's a 0 set, that also is a 0 set, and a 0 set. So any number and its opposite is going to be 0 because these are all 0 sets. Let's look at adding a positive and a negative number that aren't opposites. -3 plus 5. So we have our counters. We have 3 negatives and we have 5 positives. This is a 0 set. That's equal to 0. That's equal to 0. That's equal to 0. So we have to look at what we have left. What we have left are 2 positives or 2. Let's look at this one. We have 4 negatives and 2 positives. Well, this is a 0 set, and that's a 0 set, because 1 negative and 1 positive is 0. What do we have left? 2 negatives. So -4 plus 2 is a -2. Let's look at this one. 6 positives plus 3 negatives. Well, that's a 0 set, That's a 0 set. That's a 0 set. What do we have left? 3 positives. So 6 positives plus 3 negatives equals a positive 3. Let's look at this one. We have 6 negatives and we have 5 positives. Well, that's a 0 set. 0, 0, 0, 0. What do we have left? We have left 1 negative. So negative 6 plus 5 would be negative 1. All right, let's have you try one. If we have 5 negatives and 7 positives, pause the video, see if you can figure out the answer. Welcome back. Well, hopefully you realized that all of these are 0 sets. So what do we have left but a positive 2? So negative 5 plus 7 gives you a positive 2. Let's try one more. We have 5 positives and 2 negatives. Pause the video, see if you can figure out the answer. All right, let's see if you got it. This is a 0 set. This is a 0 set. What do we have left? 3 positives. So 5 plus a negative 2 is a positive 3. I think you got this. All right, now here's the reality. We don't carry counters around in our pockets. And we also can't use counters when we have large numbers that we're dealing with. So what are the rules when we're adding integers? Well, whenever we add 2 positive numbers, like you've been doing since first grade, the sum is positive. 15 plus 5 is 20. Well, whenever you add 2 negatives, the sum is negative. If I have 15 negatives and 5 negatives, I have 20 negatives. When adding integers and the signs are different, meaning you have a positive and a negative, you find the difference of the absolute value of the 2 integers and take the sign of the larger number. Here's what I mean by that. We have negative 15 plus 5. Well, I'm going to take the absolute value of both of these integers and I'm going to subtract them. Remember, signs are different, find the difference. So the absolute value of negative 15 is 15. We're going to subtract the absolute value of 5, which is 5. 15 minus 5 is 10. But we're not done yet. The larger number is negative. So this 15 is my larger number. It's negative, so the answer is negative. So the answer would be negative 10 because there's more negatives than positives. Let's take a look at our counters. If I had 15 negatives and I had 5 positives, I have more negatives than I do positives. All of these would be 0 sets. And what do I have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 negatives. So negative 15 plus 5 would be negative 10. You can always refer back to this video when you're doing today's work if you need help. Have a great day.